This is Christine Perrin, host of Composed, A Timeless Way of Living, a podcast of the Humanitas Institute that explores living patterns of virtue, craft, community, and delight, and draws the classical tradition into contemporary times. Hello, this is Composed, and I'm Christine Perrin. I'm interviewing Madeleine Hewitt. Maddie is the assistant head of school at Claritas Classical Christian Academy. She taught at Great Hearts after attending Templeton as an undergraduate at Eastern, the Templeton Honors College. She is a graduate also of the master's program in Master's in Arts and Teaching. She has 4 children, and she's thought really deeply about, I think, institutions and also being part of a community and what it means to live as part of a community. So thank you, Maddie, so much for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me
here. I want to just get started with you. I mean, I gave a very brief bio, but give us a little bit about your history that would help us to know you a little better.
Sure. I was born and raised in Colorado, in a suburb of Denver, and loved growing up in Colorado and still really miss the mountains. I know that you have some connections out there, Christine, and are able to get out there occasionally. After graduating high school, I moved to Pennsylvania, actually coming to Eastern University, the Templeton Honors College there. And that was actually my first time even visiting the East Coast. So it was a big change.
What a change.
Yeah, it was a big change for me. But I, at this point in my life, have been on the East Coast for about half of my life. So it's been, I'm pretty well rooted here now and miss the mountains, but love the beauty here. After spending time at the Honors College, I graduated and then, as you mentioned, spent some time in Arizona teaching at one of the Great Hearts Academies, and I'm so grateful for my time there and the ways that I was steeped in that kind of culture and just getting to see what the classical model could look like at the K-12 level was really unique and really special. And at that point, it was pretty new, especially in the charter schools. And so getting to be kind of in the midst of that movement as it was growing was really exciting. And during that time, I was getting to know my now husband, and we were dating long distance. He was out here on the East Coast. And then we decided to get married, and I moved back to the East Coast, and we shortly after that started a family. And then I needed to navigate and figure out, okay, I know that my heart is still in education and I still feel called to be in it, but I also feel called to be, a mother. And so trying to navigate that has been a theme over the last years. But at this point, we have, as you mentioned, 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, and ranging from 8 to 6 months. So that's our range. And they all attend the school, the university model, hybrid model academy that I teach and administrate at. And so that's a really beautiful integration. There's a nursery on site, a pre-K on site. So we're there 2 days a week, and then I homeschool on the other days. And we attend a sister parish to St. Philip's Orthodox Church in Souderton, Pennsylvania. And a group of us together, with the blessing of our priest, started a little mission parish that has grown over the past 4 years. And we are a part of that exciting effort as well. So I would say those are the broad strokes.
Those are broad strokes, and they also strike me as sort of rocks in the stream that give shape to your life.
Yes.
Very demanding to have 4 children, to administer a school, to start a church. I'm interested in some of the things. I mean, I think of you as someone who knew at a very young age that you were going to stick with people that were important to you. And you did. You
Mhm.
went out to Great Hearts and taught with friends, also teaching at Great Hearts. You came back and lived with friends that you had attended college with. Could you
Yes.
tell me a little bit about um, where that instinct came from and what it was like to follow that instinct and how it's shaped you?
Of course. Uh, Particularly living in community
Yes,
after
and sort of
college.
setting your sights on
Hmm.
um, that being a priority.
So after we graduated college and after I had spent some time at Great Hearts, we of course were newly married and looking for a place to live. We ended up living in just a small apartment for roughly our first year of marriage. And in that first year, we also had our first child, Abraham, and uh, it came to the point where we had outgrown our apartment and we needed something else. And it was really interesting timing because the year that my group of friends, our cohort, graduated college, most of us dispersed across the country. So I went to Arizona. I had several other friends, actually, some of whom you know, who also went to Arizona. One went to Wyoming. We had some other friends move to Boston. Everyone just kind of spread apart. And then within a matter of a few years, we had all moved back together into the same area through a fortuitous, providential series of events. And so we had this kind of opportunity to think about intentionally, okay, we have at this point a rich friendship that has developed not only over time but over a series of extremely formative years, and we had come around these formative texts and these formative ideas and had very similar visions for life, and many of us were or had recently become or were on the path to becoming Orthodox or Catholic. And so that was all very much, we were thinking about, okay, which parish is going to become our home, and all of those questions we were asking at the same time together. And so we, with one other couple, ended up actually living with them. We had a shared home for a couple of years, and that was when we had our first child, and then they had their first child in the midst of those years. And that was honestly motivated by kind of a why not? you know, we we love each other and we share a common vision for life, and we're also both strapped for cash, and it'd be nice to save some money. And so we did that, and it worked really well. And, our friendship was better by the end of it, which I don't think everyone can say after
No,
attempting
that's an
something like
achievement.
that. So that's a real gift. We're very much still in their lives, and they are in ours. And honestly, after that, we then had several other people that ended up living with us in that home. Several of them were students at the honors college, at the college we graduated from. One young man stayed with us for a number of months while he was waiting to get married. And then we had a high schooler at our church that stayed with us and finished out her senior year. So we had a number of different people kind of come in our lives and in our home. And those were in our very early years of raising a family. That we had our first two children through those years. And honestly, Evan and I talk about this all the time, that one of the things we really miss about no longer living with another family in our home is just what it did for our kids. That it was this sense of normalcy around people that love me and that I love, that are outside of my family, that are in my day to day and checking in on me and calling me nicknames and reading books to me, and whatever it is, and that those people still have real bonds with our children, which is so beautiful. And the other thing that we miss is just the accountability, that you aren't going to say certain things to your spouse in front of someone else, right? And that that helped kind of keep us in check in certain moments, and that was a gift as well. But we also, in that golden little season, had several other families that lived in the same town. And so we were regularly going to their house for dinner. They were coming to our house for dinner. We were meeting up at the local park or walking the local trail. We were seeing each other at church on Sunday. Several of us ended up moving to Claritas, to the academy, and are still there and schooling our children there. So I would say it happened pretty organically. And at the same time, it's at this point, the fruits of over a decade of
Mm-hmm.
relationship, well over a decade, actually, and of effort and of change too. It's really interesting to
Mm.
be bonded around ideas and texts and then need to expand beyond that, not to outgrow it, but to move from that very academic setting to how do we engage and converse about motherhood and fatherhood and parenthood and what it means to be a Christian in the world and how to raise children well, and down to the nitty gritty. What kind of diapers do we use, and what books do we read to our kids? And all of those
Mm.
questions, being able to do that in community and with one another is, at this point, feels so normal to me. And I think is easy to forget what an incredibly rare gift it is.
It really strikes me that what you're describing is a culture, layers
Hmm.
of a civilization, in a sense, that you've built together that began by all of you being drawn to Templeton, which is a great books program that really focuses on a faculty of friends, and
Yes.
that spills out in concentric circles from there, so that
Hmm.
that faculty of friends includes you among them, and then
Yeah.
you befriend each other, and you have these things that you've all read together. You've thought about the ordinary life, you thought about the good life, you thought about holiness, and then you go out and try to live it. I teach a course where we talk about the blessed life, the architecture of happiness, and we start with philosophy. We start with Aristotle, but we end with Marilyn Robinson because
Hmm.
it's messy. It's
Yes.
not this abstraction. You need the abstraction. You really need it.
Yeah.
You have to understand the principles, and then you really have to understand how complicated it is to make it work. But I
Indeed.
love what you've described. I've always been very admiring of you all, and curious too about how where it would go. So that's what we're talking about now. But maybe we could shift to Claritas and your work
Mhm.
there, and your sense of providing for others. You don't just attend and have your own
Mhm.
needs met, but there's something in you that desires to shape the institution. And I'd love to hear about how that rewards you, what drives you towards that, what intuitions you've had that
Hmm.
caused you to do that work.
So my involvement at Claritas also, I would say, through a very beautiful series of events that you can just see the hand of God in. I was able to, when I was pregnant with my first child, I was working an office job at the John Templeton Foundation. And it was a very good job, and I enjoyed aspects of it. And at the same time, I felt very much called to be in the classroom still, but wasn't sure how to do that while also expecting this child and thinking,
Mm,
I don't know that I can financially or otherwise justify putting my child in childcare for 5 days a week so that I can go teach. And so that was weighing on me. And around the same time, my husband Evan met someone who was at Claritas, and he said, you should talk with my wife about this academy that she's a part of and that our kids are a part of. And so he did. And then it turned out that they that very semester suddenly had a teacher, a literature teacher in high school, leave because he moved or something. And so they had this opening. And so in the last couple months of the school year, I jumped in. And my baby was due in September the following year. And so I assumed, oh, this is so nice. I really like it here, but they're not going to ask me back because I have this new baby due in the fall. And at the end of the semester, they said, we would love to have you back. Please seriously consider it. And you can go on maternity leave. And we have this nursery and so anyway, so it seemed like a no-brainer. And so I did. And it's really amazing. Just as a quick side note, I was talking with a mom who has 3 young children at Claritas, and her oldest is in kindergarten. And she was saying, our weeks look so different because we have this community, because we have this. If we didn't have this, I would be home alone with 3 children, yet very young, every day, all day. And I am instead able to be a part of this community, and it's so rich and so life-giving. And I thought to myself, I never had to do that. I never had a year where I was alone at home with my babies, which I know that some feel drawn to that. I was very happy to be in the midst of community from the start and to be surrounded by other moms that were further along in the journey than me. And the friend that I referenced, who was kind of our entry point to Claritas, she quickly became a mentor for me and is now the head of school and the one that I work the most closely with. And coincidentally, her husband is my husband's boss. So we have that kind of funny connection as well. But it has been such a rich blessing and just the gift that keeps on giving. And I started teaching literature, just one class, and then they suddenly needed a history teacher as well. And so I started teaching history and literature, and we shaped it on the Great Hearts model of a humane letters course. And so now I was teaching humane letters and literature in middle school as well. And then a few years in, I became the dean of students, and I was that for several years, and then slowly moved into the role that I am now. So, and then started homeschooling my oldest a couple of years ago, and now I'm homeschooling my oldest too, while also doing this job. So, that is my kind of entry point. And I will say that as much as I was shaped by Great Hearts and have been able to carry so much of that into my approach to teaching and my faculty development and all of that, I didn't know what it was like to teach in the context of moms having their babies strapped to them while they're teaching, which I do every day now because I have a 6-month-old. Or, moms being able to eat lunch with their kids and then go and teach their class. And so that integration was very new to me. I had never seen anything like it.
No.
And now to be able to be in the midst of that and to be shaped by it, informed by it, and to be in a culture that is constantly elevating, constantly calling you as an educator and as a mother and as a Christian up and up and up with all the support. It's high expectations and high support for the teachers, for the students, for everyone. And that is just, it's unique. I haven't encountered it anywhere else. So I'm really grateful to be a part of it. And it's been really interesting coming in, having a brand new baby and having these ideas about education, and now homeschooling my own children and my ideas being adapted and changed, and realizing the pitfalls of idealism and in certain senses and all of those things. So it's it's really amazing, and there hasn't been a year being there that I haven't felt challenged to become better.
Hmm.
And it, either as a teacher or a mom or a human or a Christian or whatever role you may want to say, but it this might sound a little bit dramatic, but being able to be there has kept me alive in myself in a way that I don't think would have been true otherwise. I wouldn't have felt called in the same way to keep lifting my gaze, lifting my gaze,
Hmm.
lifting my gaze, keep looking out, keep looking up. How can I improve? How can I change? How can I serve this group of students better? How can I be a better mom? All of those questions I think would be dulled
Hmm.
inside of me if were it not for this community.
I love the things you're saying. First of all, that phrase, alive in myself, that's really beautiful. I want to write it down. Um, that's something that I think we all are created to desire. But I
Yeah.
really love hearing you say it. And I love this context that you're building for us of first of all, well, first, this elevation, lifting of the gaze, high support, being with other people. Also, integration, a life that's integrated. I think that one of the privileges, perhaps, of your generation that I think our generation didn't really experience as much
Mhm.
is that hope for an integrated life, for a life where
Yeah.
you're not talking about work life balance, but rather you're
Mhm.
talking about these domains that can fit together more or less, but much, much more, as you're describing, than I've ever seen. Um, and I remember as a young mother wishing that there were a great museum near me. Because I went to college in Baltimore and then I was living in Harrisburg and there really wasn't, and I thought, "Well, if we could just go to a museum every day." I know that's crazy, but I just wanted to be in a place that was doing the kinds of things that you were doing, and that
Mhm.
was my instinct for how I could find it, but never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would be able to teach and be with others, doing the same things, alongside mothering. So
Yeah.
I do really think that you're perhaps on the edge of an experiment that is very fresh, and very, it is a kind of vanguard that I'm excited about. Um, and I knew that. I knew I wanted to talk to you about it, but hearing you say that that you're not alone and that it keeps raising you.
Mhm.
You also mentioned, though, that you're learning about idealism because whenever you've lived in a place where you've read these texts and you've lived with these people and you have this sense of how you want life to be, there's always that I don't know, push for purity or something.
Yes.
And so, has there been something about community that has helped you to outgrow that as well, or to nuance that? Um,
Mhm.
you're striving alongside what? What's the element that's been introduced?
Yes, absolutely. I can think of a few examples. I remember having a conversation with a colleague a couple of years in where I was trying to take all of these practices that I had learned in Great Hearts that served that community well and
Mhm.
kind of import them into Claritas. And I remember we were at Claritas, we have uniforms, and we were struggling to enforce the uniform policy. And so I think in my first year of being dean of students, I said, well, we just need to implement an infraction policy. And this mom just laughed and she said, we're not going to do that. And now looking back, I'm like, that was so silly. This is this small, tight-knit community, and that may have worked in a in a school where you have 500 students, and that's, the sort of formality that you need to fall back on. But it didn't work in this context, in this community. And I had to learn those things
Hmm.
over the course of time. And I think the real thing I learned through it is that you can't take shortcuts, that you need to build relationship, and building those relationships is where you're able to hold those expectations. And if the relationship is not there and it's not strong, any expectation you have for the student is going to be held with resentment.
Hmm.
And that took a few years for me to learn. And I've been able to have the sorts of deep relationships with my students in this place that I wasn't able to have in former contexts, just because of the size and the common ground that we share and a number of different factors. And also relationships with their parents, which one of the things that's really unique about Claritas is that the parents are so involved, and that especially with the younger children, there's parents on site all the time sitting in on their kids' classes. Many of them teach.
Hmm.
And so having that deep bond with the parent then also helps to bolster the relationship with the student and vice versa. So that's one thing that I learned. And then honestly, the real crash course that I've had in helping a unhelpful idealism die is just having my own kids in the
Yes,
program.
yes, yes.
it it never have I been so humbled, to be the discipline person, and then have my own child being the one making trouble in the classroom is so humbling. And it also gives me an inroad and a deeper understanding and compassion for other parents working through these things, and also for the child, and to understand, really try to understand them in their own particular person and in their own particular context. And I frankly just don't think that I felt as motivated to do that, or maybe I didn't have the imagination that I needed for that until I had my own kids.
Hmm.
And so now when I step into a meeting with a parent where we need to discuss something happening with their child, I am able to enter it with such humility. And hopefully, I mean, um, I've kind of earned my stripes in that way because I've had enough instances of of being humbled myself by my own children and their struggles. So I think that, and for those things to be able to dwell together, for me to be able to be in that role and also be working through my own struggles as a parent, that is also a very unique gift. The
Mhm.
fact that I'm able to do both things at the same time is pretty amazing. And I'm really grateful to have colleagues that are both behind where I am in terms of season, and a little bit ahead, and very far ahead,
Hmm.
and being able to work through these things with them with a range of perspective and distance or closeness to certain situations.
It strikes me that one of the ways I would talk about what the metaphors I would use for what you're all doing is almost like a biodynamic farm because you have Templeton Honors College, and then you have sending you know parents and teachers,
Yep.
and then you have students from Claritas going to Templeton, and
Yes.
then you have teachers going back to Templeton for master's degrees. And there's this kind of I mean, it's like the soil is being enriched, which we've learned, it takes a lot of time to enrich soil. And, you use I don't know, you use the manure, and you use um, you know, all the parts are working together. The things you plant are
Mhm.
kind of protecting each other. Um, I'm wondering, I'm thinking about Benedict's rule, and
Yes.
I'm wondering about maybe, and by rule, I just mean like the measure, the standard, the
Mhm.
kinds of lines that he laid down for monastics to live together in community well. I'm wondering what maybe some of the aspects of your rule is. I'm assuming it's tacit for the most part, but maybe even some explicit rules that either your community has for itself, or even that you would have for yourself in a day that have been super helpful. Also, I just want to say that your school does pay its teachers, so this is not a volunteer. I mean, obviously people do volunteer, but it is a paid position, and so there's a aspect of professionalism about it
Yeah.
that I'm imagining is part of the rule from some
Yes.
of the things you've said.
Absolutely. So I've been so lucky to work with this woman, Kim, who has been such a friend and a mentor to me over this time. And we've worked together on coming up with different rules and also um, crafting certain documents and that sort of thing that are kind of guideposts for us. So one of them is called the Decorum Primer, and it is a one-page document that it starts with a statement and it says something like, it starts with a belief, what we believe. At Claritas, we believe that speech is formative and powerful.
Hmm.
And then it has kind of subpoints under that. So for that reason, we don't gossip about one another. For that reason, we use kind words that lift one another up, and it gets more and more granular and specific. So that's one thing that we can return to easily, and that we make it's not just a perfunctory thing for some people to sign at the beginning of the year and then forget about it. It really is our mirror. When we're navigating a situation, we say, okay, are we upholding these beliefs and these tenets about students and about education? So that has been very helpful. A phrase, you mentioned St. Benedict, one of our phrases that we often share with one another is from St. Bernard of Clairvaux. And he has this great quote where he says, "Notice all things, reprove some things, cherish the brethren." And that's something that we
Oh,
often
that's
refer
lovely.
to and remind each other of, and
Mhm.
especially in stickier situations.
Mhm.
So that would be one thing. We
Can
talk
I
a
just
lot.
interrupt one
Oh,
moment?
yeah,
It
yeah.
strikes me that that one page, first of all, I have been parts of organizations with, like,
Mm, a
very
handbook.
thick
Yeah.
handbooks. So the one
Yes.
page I love. It also strikes me as a yes before the no.
Mm,
Like, a lot of
mhm.
these are the yeses of our community, almost your fiats.
And absolutely, and it's something that we lead with when we're talking with prospective families, and we ask them to read it and ask them for their response. And we ask them, is this a picture that you are does this document paint a picture that you're interested in being a part of and that you're excited about being a part of? Because there are things on there about cell phone usage and about the fact that we wear uniforms and the fact that we smile at one another and greet one another by name in the halls, those
Mm.
sorts of things. And that some people are immediately on board and others think it's not for me. And so that's really helpful in that regard as well. But another thing we often say to one another is that we always seek to assume good intent on the part of one another, whether that's another teacher, whether that's a teacher of one of our students, whether that's another parent or an actual student. We always assume good intent to start.
Mm.
And then if there comes a point where we need to resolve a misunderstanding or a miscommunication or a conflict, we assume good intent and then we ask a direct and kind question.
Mm.
So that is another one of our kind of rules that we come back to. And for me, in my role, it's so helpful for me to have that in my mind. Okay,
Mm,
am I assuming good intent? Okay, we need to move to the next step in this conversation. What is a kind and direct question that I can
mm,
ask? So, if others bring concerns to us, then we can turn back to them with that. Have you assumed good intent, and have you asked a direct and kind question to this person?
mm,
So those are a few that I would name.
mm. How about in your day or in your week? How does that translate into patterns that you aim for when you're not at Claritas?
Yes. So it's really helpful that we have the pattern of Tuesday, Thursday. Those are the days that we go to Claritas. And then we naturally have our Monday, Wednesday, Friday at home. And I would say Monday, Wednesday tend to be the kind of we're putting our hand to the plow and we're, digging into homeschooling. And I'm trying to, during nap time or in quiet moments, send a quick email or make a quick phone call or write something down for a lesson plan or whatever it is. So we also have extracurriculars on those days. So those tend to be the full days.
Hmm,
And then we have our Claritas days, Tuesday and Thursday. And then Friday, I tend to try to really focus on it's kind of my reordering day, bring order back to the home and deal with the odd pile of laundry that's been in the corner all week and the stack of books that's been on my desk all week and all of those sorts of things and kind of prepare for rest to go into the weekend. And I've found that as time goes on and as I've had more children, rest can't usually just occur organically. You really do have to prepare for it
hmm,
and to be set up for it. And so I think of Friday and the first half of Saturday as my kind of, okay, I'm going to prepare to rest so
mm.
that I can
Yeah,
have everything in order, do my grocery shopping, all of those things, and then be able to go into the second part of Saturday and Sunday for more rest. So that's kind of the general flow of our week on a normal week.
that strikes me as very Shabbat-like, very Jewish, and the
Yeah.
I interviewed a friend who is Israeli, and I've known her for a long
Mm,
time. We went to graduate school together, and she taught me how much these rhythms and these narrowing of life can open up rest. I love what you say about
mm,
rest being something you prepare for. Um, I'm interested just in general in that idea of preparation and fulfillment,
mm,
and perhaps in all these categories we're talking about, how that was a dawning realization for you in your life, that you prepare for something in order for it to be fulfilled. You don't just arrive at it
mm.
expecting the world. Um,
Yeah.
and what role has the church played in that understanding?
Yes. So I guess I should have mentioned in the bio part that I became Orthodox. I joined the Orthodox Church when I was 16 as a teenager. So I was not raised in the Orthodox Church, and I was certainly not raised in anything liturgical. And liturgy was extremely, at least in the formal sense and in the context of a church, was totally foreign to me. So that was very new when I became Orthodox. And in the time since, it it's so deeply formed me that it's hard to even really talk about because it's
Mm,
so close to me and my life and our family and the ways that it has shaped us, and I can't really imagine life without it at this point. Um, I was thinking about this just earlier today, thinking about Advent, and right now we're in the midst of Advent, preparing for Christmas, and I was thinking a couple of things. I was thinking, first of all, about how when you're generally living life, sometimes I step outside and I look around, and I know Wordsworth didn't mean it in this sense, at least I don't think he did, but that his poem, The World is Too Much with Us,
Mm,
that often comes to mind just looking and thinking, I I don't know how to bring all of this in to
hmm,
myself. There's so much here.
hmm,
I feel that when I read a good novel, I feel that when I have a good conversation with a friend, just this kind of overwhelming sense of how boundless life is
hmm,
and how small our time and our capacity is to take it in. And I think the liturgical rhythms help us with that. They help us move deeper into what feels boundless. Um, thinking about like the mystery of the incarnation or the mystery of death and resurrection, that we get to return to that every year and every week, really. Um, the Sunday being the day of resurrection. And uh, it's, a few Lents ago, I had a cousin. One of my sons is actually, his middle name is after him, but he was just a little older than I am now, and he passed away and he left 5 children. And that was, weighing so heavily. Um and it was Lent, and I was thinking about Christ coming to die for us and the resurrection, and I was thinking, I moved through some Lents and some Paschas, Easters, and it just feels like kind of moving through the motions. And it's okay, we fast and we go to pre-sanctified and we go to liturgy and we go to Holy Week and Pascha, and it's beautiful. But then there are other times where I almost just can't believe that I get to be that close
hmm.
to that mystery. And it um it feels like such a gift, and then it's over, that
Yes.
feeling after Pascha of, I want to go back to that. I want Lent again. And but then it comes. It comes again, and
Mm,
sooner than you think it does.
mm,
And I think about that for my kids, that they're able to move in and out and in and out and in and out of these mysteries. And that some years it may not land in a profound way, but some years it will. And they'll wish that they could move even deeper into it. But Lord willing, they will get the chance to,
mm,
the following year. It's not as if moving through this life we only get these spare, you know, transfiguration, Mount Tabor types of moments. Sometimes we do get that, and I've had that in my own life, and it is such an incredible gift. But that we also have this platform and this format that we can move in and out of
hmm,
without relying on the kind of randomness of what goes into those moments. We can't really conjure them for ourselves. We need to be able to be in the context.
It strikes me, you're saying so many beautiful things, so many helpful things. First of all, just the boundlessness of life and the privilege of it, the difficulty of absorbing it. We can never really absorb it in at any given time. We absorb it over time. And one of the gifts of liturgy is that you have time, and that time it means that you're going to have repeated touches or repeated encounters of a reality. But it also, and I this is so helpful, it also means that you can't just pitch a tent and get stuck in one place. You can't sentimentalize one aspect or even the way you're feeling. You're both not responsible for conjuring up certain feelings, but nor are you allowed to sort of just stay in one place because you like it and have chosen it. Um, and so I feel in your description just the beauty of wholeness that is that we're externally moved through. It doesn't depend on us. It's a path that we take steps on, but then it pulls us, through itself, through its system, and or deeper into the cave or the underwater sea diving or whatever it is. And, that's lovely. I mean, it makes what you're saying renders my question about an early experience of beauty
Mm.
almost unnecessary because you've just told us about this beauty that's so complete in your life. But I wonder, I'm thinking of something that you did tell me once about your early experience as a student and as someone who was
Mm.
worthy of investing in, worthy of talking to. I'm not sure if I'm saying it quite right, but could you tell us about that? Because you had that and it pushed you forward, and now you are giving that to others. And so it seems profoundly important.
So growing up, I don't need to go into all the details, but I really struggled in academically in elementary and middle school, especially. And I had really poor vision that needed to be corrected, and that affected there was just a whole year of school that I couldn't read anything that was up on the board and was having trouble reading. And my teachers didn't know why. And then we eventually discovered it was a vision issue. But it took time to catch up. So I kind of had this complex in my earlier life that I was not a good student and not a good learner and wasn't intelligent and um, all of that. And then I went into high school, and it's kind of interesting because the high school that I went to was a very small Christian high school. It's no longer around, but I would describe it as pretty anti-intellectual, even though it's hard to imagine how a school could be that, but somehow this one was. And but strangely enough, there was a teacher there who I took a art and culture class with. That was the first class that I took with him. And he was a graduate of the Templeton or of Eastern. And he introduced me to, now I would consider, friends that I had never encountered before. Like Hopkins is one of the main ones, Wendell Berry, different Dana Joya, different poets and artists, Michael O'Brien, different people that I had never heard of before, and ideas that I had never encountered before. And it just completely brought something alive in me, and I was suddenly just awake to my intellect and awake to these questions
Hmm.
that I think had been stirring inside of me for all of that time. And, I had always loved to read and was very much full of wonder as a kid. But I didn't really have a place or a context or a person to engage these ideas or work through them. And this teacher was that for me. And I then went on to take a film class with him and just fell in love with film. And uh, he was the one that introduced me to photography, and I was uh, into photography for a long time. He actually then became a professional photographer himself and photographed my wedding. So that
Yeah.
was a beautiful thing as well. But he was the one that put Eastern and the Honors College on my radar. And I at first was like, I'm not going to Pennsylvania for college, but then ended up doing an interview with them. And the interview was really what sold me, just hearing the way that the sorts of questions that they were asking and the sorts of standards that they were calling their students to. That was just really attractive to me. So I have him to thank for that. And I owe him a huge debt because he really saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and no one else was kind of calling out of me. And that was kind of the catalyst for the rest of what my life has become.
Hmm.
Um, and I never would have guessed that. I never would have predicted that. And I think he also gave me this sense of, he kind of broke down the category of, quote, good student for me. He was able to show me that there are different kinds of ways to pursue learning
Hmm.
and pursue ideas that are more than just acing your geometry quiz or whatever it happens to be. And that was so helpful to me as well. And I think really ultimately put me on the path to classical education to see, oh, there is this different kind of, there's a different way to view education and students and the life of the mind that just so resonates with me and so speaks to my experience. So, and then as you mentioned, his sister ended up becoming my college roommate, and I saw her a couple weeks ago. We're still dear friends. So that also was another gift from that relationship.
Thank you for describing that. That's so helpful. I'm wondering, in the process of describing that, you've said this other way of learning, and you've mentioned
Hmm.
classical education. Do you have a concise description of that for people maybe who've never heard of that? How
Hmm.
would you explain this other way that people are calling classical?
Yes, it's a great question, and it's one that I think about a lot. And of course, it's a wide and rich and full tradition that is appropriated in multiple different ways. And so I think sometimes the conclusion from that, the fact that this wide tradition is applied in different ways, is taken to as a kind of criticism of the tradition that, oh, it's not consistent. But my sense of that is that there's actually this real beauty that this very wide, vast thing can be applied down to the particular and applied to a particular community and the people that are building that community. So, but your original question, I would say that classical education is drawing from a rich tradition that has grown for thousands of years and is drawing out the things that most make us human. And it asks the question, what is a flourishing human life? And classical education attempts to answer that question in its own context through the ages and drawing from the wisdom of all of this time that has come before us. And then it's able to take that large question, what is a flourishing human life, to what does it mean to flourish in the context of this school,
Hmm.
to what does it mean to flourish in the context of this classroom, this, and then all the way down to the particular student. And that is the thing that I have found most exciting about being a part of the tradition and a part of this movement, is helping to come alongside burgeoning adults, young adults, and help them discover for themselves what it means for their life to be beautiful and to flourish.
Hmm.
And that is such a privilege to be able to see that from up close and to help ask questions and to help put ideas and texts in front of them that help to shape and form them. But I think that is at the core of what this big thing we would call the classical education tradition is a flourishing human life and at the most particular level.
Hmm. It's interesting to hear you speak about it comprehensively and to speak about
Mm,
your role. And then also to hear that you encountered this for the first time in a place that you wouldn't call flourishing,
mm,
that it found you and it found you through a
yeah.
particular person. And so what you say, um, rings true. That's been your experience as well as the thing that you're trying to reify in other people's lives.
Yeah.
I love that. Um, I wonder if you would want to close us with a Hopkins poem. I do have, I have to say that. I mean, I know we both love Hopkins, but I just had this intuition that I needed this for our talk. And so, if you don't have a book of Hopkins poems right next to you, I do, and you could tell me one to read, or you could grab one and read it for us
Sure.
that you love.
I I have mine down on my coffee table, but for now, so the poem, my kind of entry point into Hopkins was As Kingfishers Catch Fire.
Hmm.
And that was the first, probably the first poem I ever memorized.
Hmm.
And I think it has a special place in my heart for another reason, actually. I studied abroad in Oxford during my time at the honors college. And there was this 20-minute walk that we had to take each day from our flat to the Bodleian Library where we studied every day. And that was the time when cell phones didn't work overseas. I mean, even smartphones were pretty new at that point. And so I would make this 20-minute walk every day. And I found that my mind was just such a poor friend to me at
Hmm.
that point in my life that it was full of to-do lists and things I was worried about. And I couldn't quite find a way to order my thoughts. And so I thought, I just need to memorize some poetry. And
Oh,
so I did. And I memorized several different poems, but I, of course, started with the one that I already knew, As Kingfishers Catch Fire. And so I can still feel the pebbles on the path underneath my shoes, and I can picture the river right next to me and as I'm going through the
oh,
lines, and that was such a formative experience to me. But
that's
that
lovely.
aside, the one that I have been most um, attached to recently and don't quite have it memorized yet, but have been working on it is Spring and Fall.
Mm.
That's one that I think you actually introduced to me a few years
Hmm.
ago. And for some reason, I don't know if it's my kids getting a little older or what it is, but
Hmm.
it's just been really striking me lately. And of course, coming out of the fall season, it's such a beautiful and profound one.
Oh, I love that poem. It's so tender.
Mm,
Um, and so much about the things that we're talking about too of an older voice speaking to a younger voice. I
yeah.
wish you would read it because you love it so much and you're full of it. I did just send it to you if you
Okay, let me pull it up.
okay. As you're doing this, I do have one parting question, which is, would you say, I mean, I love what you say, your mind was a poor friend. If
Mm,
people wanted to begin on a path that you've been walking on, there are a lot of things that you've said that where they could start, but would memorizing
yeah.
poetry be one place to begin? Or where would you say,
Yes,
start here?
absolutely. I was actually just thinking about this because in my current season of life, with lots of little children underfoot, I was thinking about this idea of asceticism and that in my current season, there are part of my asceticism, I would
Mhm.
say, is not being able to surround myself with all of the beautiful things that before becoming a mother, I was used to being able to surround
Mm.
myself with, like reading lots of good novels, just as one example. And I still try to do that, but it's much at a much slower pace. And most of my reading is in the context of my classes, which is beautiful in its own way, but it's different. And I was thinking, one thing I'm so grateful for, even though I've gone through seasons of really lamenting not being able to be as enriched by these great ideas in these texts, is I wouldn't have encountered poetry in the
Mm.
same way were it not becoming a mother. Because when I, have a baby and I'm nursing through the night, one of the best things to grab is a book of poems.
Hmm.
And it's not always, but oftentimes they're kind of bite-sized, and you can just read a few lines and just be rocking there with the baby and mulling over it and thinking about it, and maybe the baby swats the book out of your hand, but it doesn't matter because you already got those 3 lines in that you
Oh.
can just mull on and chew on and think about, and then maybe you even start memorizing those lines, and
Mm.
then in another week you have it memorized, and then you move on to the next one. So I I tend to read so much poetry when I have babies.
Hmm.
And that is such a gift. I was talking with
Love this.
um a very dear friend, your daughter, Zoe, and I said, I think poetry is the language of postpartum after I had my fourth child. And
I love
there was just there was something about having had a baby, and
Mm.
a novel didn't resonate with me in the right way, certainly not like a TV show or a movie. It was poetry. That's what I
Mm.
wanted
Hmm.
right by my side and on my bed and on my nightstand, and I mean, just books of poetry everywhere, and certain voices in poetry really
Yes.
speaking to me. So
Mm.
I'm very grateful for that.
Mm. The
But
language of
I
postpartum. I love that.
but I would say that, if someone is looking to begin on that journey, poetry is certainly a place to start. Psalms are a wonderful
Mm.
place to start, and
Mhm.
especially for people that are in a season like mine where it's every day is just very consumed by very physical needs of lots of little people.
Mhm.
It's so helpful to have companions along the way that can, like we are talking about at the beginning of the conversation, lift your gaze.
Mm.
And I love, one practice that I have is I'm very lucky to have a sink that has a window
Mm.
and right above it. And so on my window, I put a little piece of tape and I just tape the poem that I'm working on
Oh, that's
right in front of
fantastic.
me.
Yes.
And that is such a helpful reminder as
Mm.
I'm doing this menial task, but menial in one sense, but also an act of love and sacrifice for my family to be able to enrich and nourish my soul in a way in the midst of that. Because without that framing and without that context, mother mothering tasks can feel, I would say, degrading at times,
Mm.
and in cynical moments can feel like this is not worthy of my time,
Mhm.
this is not worthy of my mind. And having those things to anchor you through the day and to remind you that you are doing this in love and service of these beautiful creatures that God has put in your life, those have been like manna in the desert for me. You know, little things to call me up and say, these are souls that you are shaping and serving and feeding and clothing and all of those things, and that filling myself with that beauty is going to then, hopefully by God's grace, overflow into the life of my children. And so in the midst of these menial tasks, having those things to be filling my cup, so to speak, so that it can then fill the lives of my children, has been such a helpful thing to me as a mom. So I would say start small. Start with one poem, start with one psalm, start with a hymn, whatever it may be. And sometimes it's really helpful to start with something that you can sing to your children, because you are going to be hopefully singing to your children multiple times a day. And so, Baba Black Sheep is lovely and that's fine, but you could also memorize a hymn in Latin and sing it to them, and then that way you're serving them and yourself and enriching both minds at the same time. So, I would say just think about those ways that, how can you stack those things in your life so that maybe you're vacuuming and so you're serving your family, but you're also running through Psalm 50 in your mind, or trying to remember that fourth stanza in the Dickinson poem or whatever it is.
Thank you. That's wonderful advice. Now read to us.
Yes, Spring and Fall. Okay, this is Spring and Fall by Gerard Manley Hopkins. It says, "To a young child. Margaret, are you grieving over Golden Grove unleaving? Leaves like the things of man, you with your fresh thoughts care for. Can you? Ah, as the heart grows older, it will come to such sights colder by and by, nor spare a sigh though worlds of wanwood leaf meal lie. And yet you will weep and know why. Now, no matter, child, the name. Sorrow's springs are the same. Nor mouth had, no, nor mind, expressed what a heart heard of, ghost guessed. It is the blight man was born for. It is Margaret you mourn for."
Thank you so much. Thank you for this memorable conversation.
Thank you, Christine.
You've been listening to Composed with Christine Perrin, a podcast of the Humanitas Institute about composing well-lived lives of virtue, craft, community, and delight.